Very ominous. Cool. I can see a couple familiar faces from the last time around. Thank you very much for coming back to hear us again. Go ahead, Ed, if you want to introduce what we got going on here.
So, which came first? The Board Game Podcast. I am Edward Povilaitis.
And
my co-host.
I'm Mikey G, or Michel Grenier, if you speak any French out there. We're both on the same podcast, Which Game First, co-panelists. We have two other people with us as well. We are both also game designers. We have one game on the market called Student Bodies. Terrible timing for a name like that when it came out. Apologize for that. It's supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek zombie game. But anyway, we've been designing for a long time, and I think that has made us notice what's happening out in the industry, and we wanted to talk a little bit about it, and also hopefully get some input from you guys out there about maybe good practices that you've seen out in the industry, or some ideas you might have as well. But we can kind of do that towards the end when we do the Q&A and all of that. But right now we'll kind of get into what we want to talk about to start with.
So, what are the impacts of making a game? And game consists of many components when you're going to making a game. So a lot of stuff that makes your game. Get it in a box and give it to you.
Yep.
Play it.
Yep. A lot of cardboard, a lot of plastic.
Probably the first one most people think of is shipping.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are a few exceptions, but most of our board games are made in China. Mm-hmm. And then get on a boat, comes over here to some port, gets on a truck, goes over to some distribution center, then gets on a truck again, comes to a game store or your Amazon warehouse, and then gets on a truck again and gets to your house or your game store.
Yep, and so all the energy that goes into that, all the fossil fuels that are burned to make all that stuff happen. If you're making your game and you're not considering that, you maybe should. Maybe lighter materials or stuff like that to incrementally shrink down the amount of impact it has there. But go ahead.
No, wood.
Wood.
By and large, most board games have some sort of wood product. Either wood cubes, wood pawn, meeples, but even just the box itself technically is wood if you start to look at cardboard, paper, and all that type of stuff.
Yep.
And it's interesting to note that one of the first sustainability things you can look at for wood is to ensure that it actually comes from a sustainable source. Now, some people are concerned that you're not cutting down the rainforest in order to make your board game. And there are ways to look into certifying that. And one of them is called, we'll get into a little bit more later, the Forest Sustainability Council. They have a way to, it's kind of a certificate to say that this wood came from a sustainable source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great idea that they're actually bringing all that sort of thing into one place, because before you really didn't know who to ask, when you're making your game components for your game, like where can I get sustainable wood for this? There's no central location, and we're hoping that with some of the other components too, you're going to find a central location to ask something like, where can I get recycled plastics? Where can I get the wood? Where can I get, all these different parts? But right now, not a whole lot of places out there to centrally find the answers to those questions.
I think plastic is probably on the mind of a lot of people when you're talking about environmental impact and sustainability.
Yep.
A big part of it is it made out of recycled material? It's hard to know that. It's not like, hey, this stuff has been recycled. Or if we want this plastic stuff in your board game, how do I recycle it? Because unlike most of your consumer goods, you don't really see a recyclability symbol on the bottom of your mini.
Mm-hmm. So plastics too, people are replacing a lot of plastics, but also if you think about something that some of the water bottle companies did, is they just took something that you're just going to throw away anyway, like the lid of your plastic bottle, and you might notice that some of them used to have a nice tall plastic lid, but now they're about half the size. And even a tiny shave off of that sort of thing, and a thought like that, that little plastic ring at the bottom too that usually snaps off when you open it, you get rid of those things and it adds up really big over time. And I think some companies are starting to think about it, and it's because of the kind of pressure we put on them, or internally they have pressure on them to do that, and we're putting pressure on them with our dollars to think of really innovative ways. And a lot of times in the board game industry, in the design industry, that's kind of, as a designer, which a lot of us are a one-man operation, or like two people that are doing the design, that's kind of the last thing on your mind. So we kind of just wanted to bring it up in an arena like this to maybe, make people aware of it, talk to their designer friends and companies that they buy their games from, and kind of give feedback and some suggestions on that too. So.
Coming back to cardboard, because, I talked about the cubes, meeples. Cardboard, almost every single game box is a big or small, hopefully, cardboard box. Cardboard is generally your most expensive piece of your game.
Strangely enough, yeah. The single most...
Adds a lot of the weight to it.
Yeah, a lot of times the single most expensive component. And a lot of the decisions that are made about the amount of cardboard that goes into a game are not necessarily for the gameplay. They more are about marketing. So when you want to make your box look big and fluffy and heavy and have a lot of weight and value to it. And a lot of times the way they do that is to make the box bigger and flashier, or to make the punch outs in there have a bigger, landing space around them, or adds more heft to the box. And, while all of us, want that, like just kind of in a visceral way, if we kind of start putting a little more pressure on the game companies, or at least give them incentive not to do that by saying, I'll still buy your game even though it's not as heavy as it could be, or as big and flashy as it could be, because I like the idea that you're cutting back on some of these materials. A lot of times that's one of the stumbling blocks, is that, is marketing for these games. So. Okay.
And the box often the most expensive component of the game.
Yeah, as a single component in the box, oftentimes, especially because of the printing and stuff. Well, we'll get to that in a second. So.
And again, metal. It doesn't come up that often, but if you got the metal coins, they're sometimes offered in a game.
Well, don't take away my metal coins.
It's somewhat hard to know how to recycle those. It's like,
Yeah, one of the best ways to make them less impactful is to just keep those games. Use those coins in other games too if you can. Like a lot of, I know it's kind of weird to think that you would integrate your games together at all, but sometimes, you get that one cool set of coins, and I think that some companies are doing this now. They're selling a more generic versions of these coins separately, and that could be a really good thing if you want to have an upgrade to your games, is to just buy one of those separate sets of coins and kind of distribute it, use them throughout the games. Another thing people are doing, instead of like paper money, which is, I think, mostly gone out of the market anyway, but they're replacing it with like poker chips, especially the nice heavy poker chips they already have. They're just using those in place of money. And you'll find that it's, not only is it better for the environment to recycle that stuff, but also in a lot of games, it's easier to just handle those chips. I think a lot of people are printing them now, but they're a lot easier way to handle money in your games too. Sorry, go ahead.
And then there's the whole act of putting it all together. The chemicals involved in getting the printing done and gluing it all to your box, and maybe there has a nice UV coating on it to make it nice and shiny, and then wrap it all up and send it out to you.
Yep, wrap it in a nice plastic shrink wrap, which everybody loves, tearing off the outside of their box. This is something that I feel like, again, we need to put the pressure on the market, or at least reward people who aren't doing it. There is a company out there now that's using just plastic tabs on like stickers on the outside of the box and the four sides, instead of fully wrapping it in shrink wrap. And you wouldn't believe how much plastic that would save on each thing. So part of our job out here, if and I'm assuming everyone at least cares a little bit that's in this room, is to reward it by purchasing those games, or letting the game store owners know, or if you want to go all the way up to the manufacturers, let them know, thank you, we totally still love this product. It's not going to make us buy it more by having a shiny plastic wrapper on the outside of it. So.
That's the packaging.
Yeah.
We should kind of cover.
Yep. I mean, that's packaging is not just the wrap on the outside of the box, but you also have to think about how it's shipped, how many fit into a case pack and all that. And some of that impact can come from the designer itself. Like I can make the box bigger and have more components, but if I make a smaller, more compact one, more in a case pack, less cases to pack, and a lot like when we were when Obama was president, and I don't know how you feel about all that. I don't want to be political about it, but I remember he was telling people to buy, more efficient light bulbs for their house. He kind of got mocked for it in the media and all that because, they're saying, oh, great, we're going to change the light bulbs and it's going to fix everything. Well, that's not what we're really going for in any of these talks. It's those little incremental personal things that we can do that are going to add up over time. So, so try to, when you're out there, try to think of it as a part of the solution when you're coming up with all these like smaller ideas to make a bigger impact overall.
So, a big part of that insert in the box. How many of you have gotten a box, look at that insert, already have an expansion or something, can't fit it in, just went whoosh.
Yep, you all know that. Yep, I see a lot of hands out there, that vacuum sealed, beautiful insert that doesn't do anything for you anymore because it's not built for the expansion. Oh, what's that? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
What is the value of going green? Well, the big buzzword here is sustainability. Just making sure all of your components that go into the game come from sustainable sources. As I mentioned before, making sure the wood comes from a sustainable source. Maybe kind of look into using recycled plastic if possible. There are little measures like that can help increase the sustainability of the product.
And not only is the sustainability good for the planet, which we're all here for, but also in the end, your costs are going to go down for things if they're more sustainable. There'll be less demand for something if it's, still able to be reproduced more easily. So it's a win-win for everybody to try to find products that are sustainable.
And efficiency. Now if you got that giant box with all that empty space, if you actually make the box a little smaller, it's actually more efficient. You can get more things into your case. It is less weight. Shipping is done by weight. It's a little cheaper to ship. So there is a little efficiency to be gained in minimizing the amount of materials that are being used in your games.
Yeah, and if you're like me, you're from like a city, like I'm in New York City, and our apartments are about a quarter the size of a normal apartment for like 4 times the price. And everything you put into that house, you have to really want it there. So shrinking that size down just a little bit on each thing is kind of also a win-win because more board games fit into my house now.
And then, of course, there's going to be an audience that's going to appreciate and appeal to that effort that some companies will make into striving for sustainability or having a minimal impact. We're trying to move at least a little bit of a foot forward in reducing that input.
Yep. And this is where like an individual person could make an impact really is to re-stress that point I made before is letting the stores know or letting the companies know specifically we appreciate this, not only like we may not have even bought this game if it wasn't for this like bit of innovation you made or at least an attempt to help to stem the impact and the footprint of board games in the industry. So that's one of the things we can all do.
And it's kind of more of we as consumers say, hey, I like this type of attitude. Mm-hmm. The more companies will notice, that is a way how we can appeal to people as well.
Yeah, and believe me, you start talking dollar signs and they start listening immediately, trust me.
I'm going to go over a couple of examples of what some companies that are doing this type of sustainability work. One was Earthborn Games that did a Kickstarter a little bit for Earthborn Rangers. And they have a sustainability part of their Kickstarter plan. One of their stretch goals was to have regional manufacturing if they can get that many backers, like a couple thousand backers from a region, they'll have regionally based manufacturing. So, like, we got 2,000 backers from the US, so we're going to have a US-based manufacturing. We got 2,000 backers from Europe. We're going to try to do now, it might be ultimately a slightly different product because it's done by other people, but it'll be the same game manufactured locally, so they'll reduce the impact of all the shipping and being able to locally source the materials.
Yeah, I mean, the difference right now between, the 10,000 minimum copies that you're going to get from China and like the United States having some lower minimums but way higher differentials is insane, But I think we're in a kind of a time right now where we have an opportunity because the shipping is so difficult right now for overseas that a lot of local manufacturers are looking for ways to like take advantage of that right now. So this is kind of a good thing to think about is, let them know we want to buy your product and we want to buy it here. We're willing to pay, maybe an extra couple of bucks on the game because we're going to actually get it into our hands.
Now, Haba is a giant toy company in Europe. And one of their big commitments was to durability. They have a durability commitment. And the idea with that is, one of the ways to improve the carbon footprint of your product is the fact that it lasts for a while, it gets reused. The component is durable enough that, hey, not only am I going to use it, I'm going to hand it down to somebody else and they're going to use it. And they might hand it down to somebody else after that and they'll use it. And now something but all that the impact comes in the manufacturing, not necessarily the use of the product. And so the more it gets used, the more it reduces the impact of the game. And another thing Haba committed themselves to doing in their corporate statement is a replacement service where, if you're missing a component, we'll send you whatever component we need. This way, again, instead of having to go out and buy a whole new game. You lost a few cubes. Here, let me send you a few cubes so now you can enjoy the full game again.
And you should all feel pretty good out there as far as this hobby is concerned. Like, we are in here talking about, ways to reduce our footprint, but in general, board games are kind of a great investment in the earth and, in just your entertainment because they last so long. And I think Haba recognized that fact and kind of doubled down on it to make sure that you keep these games. I hope they're good. I hope the games are good enough to play. And we just did a panel on vintage games, so I'm hoping some of like Haba's products can be something that you don't just make a new version of, but you're actually playing the original one and it still has all the original pieces and stuff. But I think it's a great idea to make your games have higher endurance so that they're going to last and make and take away from that impact.
Another nice commitment that Haba made was they're looking into, like you mentioned before, instead of the shrink wrap, the little back tab, and using paper bands instead of shrink wrap for your stuff. Or even instead of putting plastic baggie, putting paper bag in there for the store your components.
Yeah. Who's opened a box and had all like stacks of their like cardboard shrink wrapped also? And then when you look in the side, it's like this nest. Like the box is only this big, but there's a nest of plastic like this big on the side. And honestly, before I really started putting any thought into that, I was like, it was almost a point of pride. Like, yeah, check that big mess out. Like I opened this cool thing, but over time, I'm like, I just want to play this game. I don't really need to make such a mess of it. So I'm hoping that people can drive that point home to the people who are making these things.
And then what Stonemaier Games did is they took a look at their games and they tried to put together their own self-assessment of how they're doing on a few things in order to be a little more transparent. So Jamie Stegmaier, owner of Stonemaier Games, and put together his self-assessment on. That's right, a little. And he went through some of the games and made a commitment to try to improve some of the sustainability products and commitments in this new game, Rolling Round. That's one of the first ones he looked at and said, I'm going to try to improve my sustainability goals on a few things. And I have a couple slides from that, it'll show his self-assessment on some of those goals.
And I'm hoping that, it takes a little time, but hopefully there will start to be an industry standard where people can refer to this chart and, do a good, honest self-assessment of where they are on that. So I know it's hard to get anybody or any company to assess themselves, but it would be worthwhile to at least think about some centralized way to consider it, or at least have something to look at to know what to consider, because each person has their own part in the chain, and they don't necessarily think about how they're working together to be better. So anyway, the chart will come up in a second, I think.
There's some of the lingo for the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council. They're the ones I mentioned earlier that do a certification survey to show that the wood comes from a sustainable source. Paper core. So one of the things there's cards always have like a core in the side of it.
Yeah.
And often it's cardboard.
Yep.
Sometimes it's plastic.
Yep.
Depending on what type of core you're talking about for your card.
And it's hard to decide in a way which cores are best. Like, you don't want to just go with, you're trying to be less impactful, go with the weakest core, because some cards, like, basically you can tell what the core is like by the snap. Like if you snap the card, how like loud and quick it snaps back. It tells you what's in there. But some games are better off with like a stronger core, just because the cards get used a lot and they don't want to get worn out and wasted. But in general, having a lighter core in there, especially if your cards are not constantly being shuffled or bent in any way, would be better overall, because those things do, like you said, they go all the way from a paper core all the way up to like a plastic core inside of the card. So,
I think the first time I heard about this, the core of cards from playing Magic the Gathering type stuff. Anyone heard like black core or green core cards?
It's just the name they give for what material or how thick the inside of it is, and generally the darker the name of the core, the thicker the core is on it.
Spot UV. Sometimes you'll get a box and it'll have a certain part of the element. It'll be shiny, just in that one little area, usually a part of the graphic. It's called spot UV. It's a plastic laminate that's on that specific area that was made through a process of UV to make that area grab onto the plastic.
Yeah, so like when you tilt your box, like the font on the box or whatever will be shiny. That's what spot UV is. And it involves a decent amount of chemistry and also a little extra energy to kind of like bake that onto the box. But I think it's beautiful, but also
shiny.
Yeah, it's real nice and shiny. But if I could have that instead of the plastic wrap, I would just do one or the other. But yeah, that's one of the processes that's kind of new, and we're still kind of figuring out how impactful that is.
One-time use. I think that's kind of become pretty common now, because everybody talks about one-time use plastic. It's now a common term, and there's not a lot of it in board games. Mm-hmm. The shrink wrap is probably the biggest offender.
Yeah.
You take off the shrink wrap, done.
Yep. Yeah, so if you can tolerate not having a shrink wrap game and tell your story, you can do that. Definitely do that. Yeah.
Hopefully your board game isn't a one-time use.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're not telling you to go home and like pick it against legacy games, or anything like that. Those feel kind of like one use, but that's not exactly the part we're talking about. Although I do get furious at the legacy games. I can't do it, man. I just can't. Anybody out there cry a little bit when they have to like tear up or wreck one of their legacy parts? Yeah, yep, that's right. Just one, that's it? You guys are all cool with it? Oh, you just don't do it. Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, you avoid it altogether, yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to say anything really bad against legacy games. I think you actually, if you think about how much use you get out of a legacy game compared to some of the other games you might buy, if you play a legacy game from beginning to end, you probably played that same board game more times than you played most of the other games in your collection. So we're not saying that just because you use the game one time through, it's a terrible thing. It actually sort of is pretty good overall for you. So.
What press inserts? So those are your cardboard inserts, or the plastic inserts that have they're formed through the plastic.
Are you looking for the name of that? You're not talking about a vacuum form, right?
Right. This is the inserts that are pressed in and formed to a specific shape.
The pressed cardboard ones,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like a wet, slurry kind of cardboard thing, and they put it in a press. and it like presses the water out, and it becomes, you probably felt it, it's like a really like, well, like if you tear it, it kind of gets like dusty and like, all that, but it's, that's one of the things that, I think, honestly, those kind of inserts could be good, because a lot of the cardboards that can be used are recycled for that. It's just a pulp that they squeeze in and like squeeze all the water out of, so it's actually not a bad insert to look for. You probably get in a lot of your Amazon shipping boxes now if you're ordering like bottles of wine or something like that, but yeah, it's a good innovation, I think.
Price per unit, PPU, come up down, it's a key factor whenever you're doing manufacturing game design, is figuring out what your PPU is going to be, that is, how much each individual unit of game is going to cost you.
Yep, and that's the magical number that producers of games are looking for, is the PPU. If you can find a way to get a material into a game that reduces that PPU, they're gonna be perfectly happy to put it in there. Now, sometimes you'll have to present it to them like, with that particular stat in mind, your price per unit's gonna go down. But other times you're gonna have to say, you're going to sell more units if you don't put this object into the box. So
let's get into the next term. MOQ, your minimum order quantities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Your price per unit changes between 1,000 and 1,000,000. And sometimes you'll find a great component on Alibaba. Be great for you. Minimum order quantity 2,000,000.
Yep. I mean, for board game design, like even if like when you're ordering from China, like 5,000 units, I don't think I've seen anything really that much lower than that. But if you go from 5,000 to 10,000 units, the price is incredibly like close. Like it's like you're getting double the amount of product, but you're only paying like 10% more or something insane like that. So it's kind of problematic though, even though you're getting a good bang for your buck. You might not be selling that many units of it, and you end up with a whole bunch of waste. And that's why a lot of these new companies, local companies, are trying to make lower quantities, minimum order, even though. So one thing that is hindering that is is something that's like a custom piece, or it has a mold to it, because the mold itself is has a minimum price to it, like $1,000 for like one mold to pour. So that's why the price dramatically drops when you're using that mold more times. It spreads out over each component. So, if you're designing out there, look for pieces that don't necessarily involve a lot of custom work, like having a mold in them. So, I'm not saying don't use games with minis, because I love games with minis in them. But 3D printers now are actually starting to reduce that price, or at least they're getting to the point where the prices can go down to have your stuff 3D printed. Although you might notice that there's kind of like a little bit of I don't know how to describe, like a fuzziness to them a little bit, like, or you can see the striations in your parts. They're getting a little better, and some people are finishing them off with like a kind of sanding process, or like a coating process of them, but they're not quite 100% there yet for that. So hopefully that's something in the future that will be improved.
And then I think most people are aware about MSRPs. It's the manufacturer's suggested retail price. And this is a price that the manufacturers themselves set what the baseline price can be. And of course, some stores sell it for more or less.
Yep.
It's just their suggestion of where it's going to be. And it's important to know what your MSRP is going to be, hopefully, compared to your actual cost per unit.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so one of the factors that goes into the MSRP is how much it costs to get it from point A to point B, because this is the end, this is the end product that they're selling, so they have to take all the different parts of the process into account. So making a box a little bit lighter can reduce the MSRP and make up the difference between producing something locally and producing something overseas. A little bit. It's definitely not yet there to the point where it's going to be like, oh, we made it a half a pound lighter. Now it's going to make up the difference between a 10,000 unit print in China. But it is definitely leaning us in the right direction. The MSRP also is something that we can contribute to helping with, because right now the MSRP is something that the company who's selling the game is going to be worried about. And if we're not willing to pay the price of it, then they won't be able to sell it, and so we have to be able to maybe accept paying a couple more bucks for a box, because I mean, just on average, a box this big, about that deep, and weighing about 3 pounds. How much do you guys think that'll cost? Let me hear some numbers out there. Boom, boom, and 3. 35, yeah. See, I've seen them for 60. You know what I mean? Yeah, true. Yeah, so, hopefully that we all kind of have a range in our head when we see the box, how much it should be worth. But I would hopefully everybody out there can take a look at that price and also consider what went into it and how they've made an effort to make the game less impactful on the environment and be willing to maybe spend a couple more bucks. Because honestly, the dollars is what really speaks when it comes to making this kind of impact. Oh, there you go.
So this is the Stonemeyer Games had their assessment, sustainability assessment of their games. So they looked at all of the games they made from viviculture all the way up to the Rolling Realm. And they try to give themselves a self-score of where they bet on a few different areas, like whether or not there was a plastic insert, whether they used biodegradable plastics or bags, if they don't use any one-time use components, how they are using recycled cardboard, board, mat, tiles, and inserts, whether or not they use only wood tokens. If it had wood tokens, repurposed wood use. No plastic other than the shrink wrap. No exterior shrink wrap. Now they do too good at that. I mean, it's a hard one to get around.
Yeah.
No interior shrink wrap or one-time use plastics. I mean, almost every deck of cards I see in a box comes in its own little shrink wrap. FSC material component. That means the Forest Stewardship Council, whether it's sustainably sourced, whether soy, algae, or water-based inks were used. That one's important because some inks and printing processes use very petroleum-based inks. Mm-hmm. This is so they're using soy-based inks here. Clean energy manufacturing. Basically, what power plants and manufacturing plants use energy to produce stuff. Is that energy from renewable resource? And then whether or not regional manufacturing or assembly was used. And I thought it was interesting that J.B. Stackpile put this up on his blog. And I thought there was an interesting self-assessment that they've done looking at all their products and seeing how they thought they scored on these areas that perhaps are areas of improvement. And you can see that his latest game, he tried to at least move the needle forward a little bit by improving, not using any plastic inserts and using biodegradable plastics.
Yeah, if you look at the dots, you can kind of see a slight evolution towards, getting a little better. But this sort of chart isn't really a practical thing to slap on the back of each game, obviously. But hopefully, over time, there'll be a way to quickly assess, like an overall score or something like that on the game, maybe that you can look at to give an idea of how hard they tried to make it actually work. Yeah.
I think communication is key for the company to talk about how are they aware of the issue, where they stand on stuff, what they are trying to do to make it better. I think that's why it's interesting to see, just in my little research to see, this company did this other company made this statement, and that you can see that they're trying to move the needle forward a little bit in certain areas, and this is how. And I think that's a nice way of informing us as consumers of the product.
And I think everybody out there fully understands the crazy, almost outsized impact that getting something to buzz on social media can have. Companies have their own teams now of people that are paying attention to TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, to see where the trends are. So collectively, if we can, make a couple of viral videos or something very popular, like Greta Thunberg just was bam, put it up in everybody's face about the environment, and that it went viral. Everybody knows her name that cares about the subject at all, and politicians and designers and politicians and companies and stuff have to pay attention to that social media buzz now. And that is one way we can contribute without having to, always be putting our money where our mouth is. We can,
and I think talking about what you're trying to achieve can help with some of that consumer perception. Like one of the reasons why boxes are the size they are for their price point, if you can communicate that your goal is to make what could be a bigger game into a smaller box because you're looking at it for sustainability reasons, and that could be a helpful selling point rather than I have to make it this size because that's what they sell for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's, kind of, it might sound like a bragging point for your company, and of course, everybody is marketing all the time, but honestly, if we make that, an important point for them to say and to actually make an effort to do it by buying the products that do that and they talk about it, then, that every little bit counts for that, so that's something we can all do.
Right. So I think this is where we can see a start where the companies are starting to take a little bit of a path down this way of communicating what their sustainability goals are, and we can speak to their manufacturer to see what steps are they taking. So once somebody started down that road, it becomes a little easier to follow them and try to achieve the same steps. Because once somebody has done it, you can follow the footprint.
Mm-hmm. Yep, HABA is here, and if anybody wants to go check out their booth too, and they'll be more than willing to talk about their principles, their guiding principles about sustainability and all that. Very friendly and open, so yeah, if you want to know a little more about that, they'd love to talk to you about it.
And talk to the community, it's basically talking to you. What are your concerns? Where are you think that people can, how can manufacturers and designers improve their design? What are the important things for you, and where are little compromises available? Mm-hmm. Okay. And to just design your game with sustainability in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of this talk comes from designers, so that's our point of view, but it would be helpful too to hear some some thoughts from you guys as well, from other different perspectives other than that. So
that brings us to the end of what we want to talk about, but we certainly would love to hear about any questions or ideas you have.
And I'm pulling out my old school paper notebook in case I hear some really good suggestions out there too. Yeah, what's up?
Should I stand up or anything?
We got a mic here if you want. It'll make it easier, but we're right here too, so. But that's just for everybody else. Hey, oh.
Hello?
Hey, oh yeah.
Hi there.
Nice.
Okay, sorry. One thing I just want to mention is you were discussing metals usage in board games. Almost every single board game manual has staples, and those often aren't recyclable and thrown into recyclables, causing errors and difficulty with that. The second thing I want to discuss was, how do you feel reimplications of board games, such as certain companies will do a QR code that you scan, have to go to their website, rather than a manual on the inside, or some printed on a card, backing as well, across many cards.
Cool. I'm going to repeat the question to him just because he's a little bit hard of hearing. So.
Absolutely great. Please do.
He's talking about staples inside of the rule books, and also using a QR code in place of it.
I mean, both of those.
The
QR code was great.
Sorry, what's that?
Sorry, not the option of using just alternative options to printed rule books.
Oh, yeah.
QR codes was just one option. I personally don't like QR codes.
Any other alternatives to a rule book that you can also besides the QR?
I mean, if the rule book is relatively small, I've seen some rule books that just a large sheet of paper, folded up, and hand it out to you. This way you can unfold it and flip it over. I mean, it can't, if it's a 200-page rule book, you're not going to get away with that. And hopefully you don't have a 200-page rule book to begin with. Yeah. But staples, really the only alternative, if you're going to bind it, you're going to use a spiral bind, which is usually plastic, or you can use glue, which is just stitch. Yeah. I mean, it's an actual book at that point, because you're staple stitching the book and gluing it to a binder and like, hey, have a hardcover book.
I mean, I
would. A little expensive.
from the designer side, I would encourage you also to think of a thematic way to make your rule book. Like, you know, you can put a string in there if it's an ancient, you know, tome, that's your rule book or something.
The QR code is great, and the idea is like, oh, I'm gonna go with a digital manual because the errata comes out before the game even gets on the shelf.
Oh yeah.
In some cases.
Encouraging people to actually trust in that QR code version of the manual is an awesome thing, because we all have a smartphone, or at least one person at the table's got to have a smartphone they can
But I
access.
mean, I don't think you want to rely on one person having that. I mean, I think it'll be a little weird to have a box that had no rule whatsoever in it. But that might be an area where we could try to educate people to like, hey, you guys have access to the internet, right?
Right, yeah. Also, you know, 4 people can read the rule book at the same time if it's QR code on the back of the box instead of passing that paper thing around. And you know, letting people know, like letting the companies know, hey, try to do this QR code version of your rule book if you can, you know.
Now, for those who have really big rule books, like I've seen Advanced Squad Leader, for example, that's like your giant rule book. They actually use a 3-ring binder, and so their rule book is loose leaf paper. Oh, you got a new expansion with new rules? Take the loose leaf paper and put it in that binder that you already own.
Yep. But a QR version of that, like, you know, they can reference pages quicker and you know, do searches and everything else. So I think companies are starting to, right now we're kind of in a transitional spot where a lot of companies are doing the printed rule book and the QR code. I think at some point it might just transition all the way over.
I've seen rule books that have the QR code, which is the how to play video, because some people just don't want to learn by reading the rules. They'd rather have a video to be taught it.
So yeah, you know, that's where we're at. Any other? Yeah, you good? I feel.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Anybody else got any questions out there, or comments, or some places that we should look into to figure out some more sustainable stuff? Hey, how you doing?
Hello, my name is Jules. I'm with a group called Gamers for Peace. We do lots of different programming on our Twitch channel, and one of the things we do is just have conversations about the climate crisis.
Awesome.
And I'm wondering while playing games usually. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for games that we could play that would instill value for the environment and the player and or the watcher, or would spark good conversations.
Cool. She's looking for suggestions of games that would teach a little bit of sustainability, or kind of have that kind of theme for her group, which is kind of had a lot of discussion about that.
Now, I can't off the top of my head think about a game that talks about sustainability directly as a game teaching feature. What about you, Mike?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is a video game called Eco. Oh, you check out Eco? Yeah, that's a really good one. That just for whoever doesn't know, that game, you are kind of individually building your own products and stuff like that, and trading and selling them, but also the way you manufacture them. Like if you have a cement mixer machine or something like that, it pours smoke into the air, and the game actually calculates for the amount of pollution that's in the air. And you can lose the game before, you know, the end game, because everything's too polluted, your crops stop growing and all that stuff. It's a really fascinating game. They put a lot of work into it, and I can't say it's 100% like accurate to Earth's carbon levels or anything like that, but it does give you an idea of how the different parts of the machine all work together and how they impact the environment. So
The way I like to think of eco is like kind of almost like a community sandbox, where it's a sandbox environment where it expects the community to find their own solution to problems.
right, yeah. So it's good. It's a good real world example of that kind of. Hey, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a little niche game company called Adventera.
Adventera.
ADVENTERRA.
Oh, Terra. Got it. Okay. Yep. What is that? I'm sorry. What kind of company is that?
It's a board game company.
For board games. Okay.
It's
Cool.
just a regional thing. He started making games for like the schools in Europe.
Europe.
For
Okay.
Recycling and energy use.
Cool. So is it like is it mostly an educationally based
Yeah.
thing? Oh, that's really cool. I'll look that up for sure. Adventera. And who's the market for that? Like who's consuming that?
He started it a long time ago specifically to sell to schools.
For two. Okay. So
Teach the kids, you know, about.
it's geared to like a younger audience or something.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's very basic, I think. I haven't actually played it.
Yeah, I'll check it out. It's very cool. To begin with, I love educational games to start with, and this particular subject is really useful. So Yeah, and everything you guys hear in here too, like, and maybe take note, check it out too. You know, giving these things even just a little bit more traffic could really be helpful for the overall picture. So Evan, Tara, I'm going to look that up. Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything to throw in there? Sure.
Yeah, just multi-purpose components. So like they'll serve one function, they serve another.
Oh, yeah.
They're like double-sided. So
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, use multifunctional. Yeah, cool.
or like even the box could be used as part of the game.
Yeah, like sometimes they flip up the box and you can use that. What is that game we played with the customizable dice that does that?
Dice Forge?
Dice Forge. Yeah, Dice Forge is cool because the game changes all the time, but there's a limited number of parts that you're like clicking dice together, like you're adding different faces on the die, and also the box, like part of it flips over, and that's kind of where you're kind of a.
And also go back to the rule book question. There are a few board games, basically old board games, that have the rules on the inside of the cover.
Yeah. Oh, we say there's more information on the back of the box. But yeah, there's a lot of the older games, especially like vintage games. You pop them open and the entirety of the rules is underneath the box there. And if anybody's ever flipped over a Monopoly box, you know you're playing Monopoly wrong if you actually read that. So multi-use components is good. Thank you very much. All right. Anybody else got something? Any questions or stuff they want to add about things they've seen out there in the wild? Sure. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
All good.
Most of my sustainability background comes from building science, so
Oh,
not
okay.
really applicable to this, but I will say just as a general practice, when we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, that's actually an order of importance.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think the thing you said about being able to reuse your metal coins, so genuine game design, like I know this is the terrible time to talk about reduce because I just bought like 6 games.
we all have a bag of games. we
But
bring
yeah,
home
like
right now,
doing things in that order is kind of intentionally supposed to be that. So designing games in a way that's like, hey, this didn't come with dice. I know you have dice or
Yeah.
something like that. So I think the thing you said about that.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to reduce first. If you never use the thing in the first place, it doesn't get wasted or put back into the earth. So I appreciate that. I never actually considered that phrase to be that literal, like in that order. So
Yeah, the marketing wasn't.
Yeah. I'm telling you, marketing is one of those things that we have to collectively work on to impact because they want things to feel like a bigger value to us, and if we put the value into the work they put into making these games or whatever products we're buying in general, but we're here to talk about games, making these things more sustainable rather than bigger and flashier, maybe they'll start leaning that way just naturally. And that's kind of how, when money impacts things, that's why, you hear the word capitalism, it's a terrible word sometimes, but also it does have a good side, is that if you really do focus on, pushing them in a direction, there's a very easy way to do it, and it's make it profitable. All right, anybody else got something? Or any questions or anything like that? Sure, yeah.
A comment on, I just filled out a Kickstarter for, I think it was Roll Camera or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Where they asked you if you wanted to downgrade your box, if you wouldn't have the expansion, and just minifying that way.
Oh, I see. So in other words, when you first initially order the product, you can say, I don't need the extra space.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. What is the name of that Kickstarter?
Roll Camera.
Kickstarter, Roll Camera. R-O-L-L, not R-O-L-E. Yeah. A lot of them use the puns, so it's hard to find them on the internet. Cool. Very good. I'll check that out. That's a really good idea, and it's so they reduce on demand the amount of space they give.
Yeah, on the survey I took literally today, they asked me if I wanted to get the regular box or downgrade.
Wow. How often do you guys hear somebody out there in the corporate world say, you want to downgrade the product? It's like a never, right? There's always upselling. I mean, I worked in retail for many years, and it's all about the upsell.
The good thing there is it's a way of collecting information too. You can get an idea. It's like surveys are very valuable to companies in the sense of truly understanding what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, it's true because a lot of these things have been kind of outdated, preconceived notion about what people actually want. And until they hear from us, and surveys, like you said, are a fantastic idea. Until they hear from us what we actually want, they're going to give us what they think we want. So yeah, that's a great idea. Do surveys. I'll have to write that tonight.
Well, yeah, it was the Kickstarter survey, so.
Yeah, I think a lot of Kickstarters now have a survey attached to them, right? So do surveys. Thank you. That's great. Anybody else got anything out there they want to talk about or ask about? All right, I mean, we're kind of towards the end soon, but yeah, go jump on in.
So there are a lot of trade-offs in sustainability choices.
True.
You know, if you think that metal components can be better than plastic or wood, they're also heavier. So when you talk about shipping and the cost of shipping, you have those heavier components that then, you know, you're trading that off in a different cost.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not just trading the less staples for a zero. You know what I mean? You are trading it for something else. So honestly, be careful in the choices that you make is kind of what you're saying, right? So be careful in the choices. You might be trading off something that's worse in the long run, and you have a lot of things to calculate in that, right? So getting the staple into the product could be expensive, could be cheaper. You know, there's a lot of parts of the process. You know, the energy use, the energy use hits in so many different ways. You know, like just having a machine to press a staple into something could be fossil fuel use. You don't even think about that. You're just thinking about the metal. So in any consideration that you're going to make, like you say, you know, try to think of all the other parts. That's fantastic.
I mean, you know, shipping is such a huge thing. I mean, it's not just where everything's manufactured, but where the raw materials themselves come from. I thought an interesting story I read where in Europe, they use wood pellets for heating. But the majority of the wood pellets that they use in Europe actually come from America. So they're shipping the wood, not only from some of the forests in, I think it was Georgia, where this article was based, and shipping it over to Europe for fuel. And it's like, no, they're reducing their carbon footprint in Europe, but they're saying that they would not take into account the shipping of the wood across the ocean to Europe. So it's like, yeah, it's wood, it's sustainable, it's low carbon footprint.
Right.
Kinda.
And this is why I think like an educational game like Eco that I was talking about before, there's definitely other ones out there. They show you the totality of what it might take to, you know, to get this product to be actually implemented. And it, you know, sometimes you just don't think of every little thing, but if you keep in mind that there is more to the process and every kind of change you might make, it's really helpful to do that. So it's hard to know them all, but, you know, think broader when you think about a change that you might want to make to something. Cool. Anybody else out there? All right. Yeah, we're oh, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
I was just gonna ask, what were your thoughts on card sleeves?
On what?
Card sleeves.
Oh, what are your thoughts on card sleeves? Card sleeves, what are your thoughts on card sleeves?
Oh, well, I mean, on the good side, card sleeves make your game reusable more. If you are using the heck out of your cards to the point where you'll have to get a new deck of cards after playing it so much, then yes, it helps the reusability of the product. Now, if the sleeves are so bad that you have to keep on getting more and more sleeves, I don't know, is it better to go get the new deck of cards, or is it better to keep buying more sleeves? I haven't really looked at that kind of comparison.
I mean, honestly, it brings up a good sub point, and I think that now we have like these stores like Walmart and like these giant stores, they're sending in products that are way cheaper, you know, like almost to the point where they're disposable, but there's something to be said for a quality product that lasts a longer time. You know, you don't buy 5 pairs of shoes, even though it costs the same as that one really good quality pair of shoes, you know.
And if you're talking about a Black Lotus, you probably want to sleeve it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the cardboard inside of there is worth way more than the paper it's printed on, that's for sure. Very cool, guys. Well, thank you very much. I think we're pretty much at the end, and you still have a few minutes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, sure. Come on, ask a question. We still have some time.
The extended producer responsibility bill, so we just passed in Maine and Oregon, and there's going to be more coming. Is that going to have any sort of effect on board games, gaming in general?
Can you repeat the question? Just I want to get him.
The Extended Producer Responsibility Acts, Maine and Oregon just passed one. It's on
Actually, I
the
gotta look
docket
that up.
for New York right now, or will be. Where the producers are more responsible, they have to pay into more of a system. Like if you use plastic, you have to pay for with carbon credits or something like that.
I really wish I understood you.
No problem. Well, what state was it in? I'll tell him.
Maine and Oregon
Maine and Oregon. And
both just passed this legislation, which is why you see, I think, Amazon like going more towards shipping in paper.
he's talking about the Extended Producers Responsibility Act in Maine and Oregon. He wants to know, like,
Do you know anything about it?
No, actually, I'm gonna have to research that. I'm not aware about that act. And I have heard of, there are some governments that are looking into sustainability laws in certain areas, and I'm aware about some of them. But I'm not aware of that specific one for Maine and Oregon. Thank you.
It's a little tough to even get legislation like that not only passed but also enforced because, I mean, people are there's a sentiment lately that there's like an infringement on your freedom if you can't do that. I'm not sure where that's coming from exactly. I'm not going to place any blame, but like it's kind of tough to pass a law like that and enforce it and have people feel okay about it right now for some reason. I'm hoping we can turn the political dial back a little bit and just cool things down and kind of consider the big picture as a bunch of people trying to work together to make things better. So.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if there's relevance to the board game.
It might, and actually I have to do some research, to be honest. I wasn't even aware of it. So
Yeah.
I'll take a look though. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, I appreciate all you guys' input here because we now have, you know, we don't come up here saying we're experts. We only have one small area that we think about in it, and it's such a big, complicated puzzle that we need everybody's help at a thing like this. And it's kind of a little bit of a selfish reason why we run a panel like this, is to get some input back for ourselves too. And we really appreciate you guys coming in for that, and thank you very much. But cool. So cool. One more round of applause for everybody. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. All right. Cool.